In this video, I'm just going to go over what my morning and afternoon was like and try to give a description, and then I'll tell you how I get treated by my family and the Department of Health and Human Services for all my hard work and efforts for helping out society. I mean, there was a psycho rich mother of mine. Do you think I was born to this mother? No. I was born to a 15-year-old mother. At the age of 2, I was taken from her and put in orphanages. These orphanages did not administer medications properly. They administered a double dose of Ritalin in the same hour on the word of a 5-year-old. Yes, at breakfast, another 5-year-old was trying to get me upset by putting ketchup in my orange juice. I refused to get upset. I continued staying calm and eating my eggs. He said, "Watch this." Went to one of the staff members, told him I didn't take my meds while laughing. That staff member asked me if I took my meds. I said yes. She brought me to the nurse. The nurse asked me if I took my meds. I said yes. At this point, they said, "Well, how can we be so sure with Bobby saying this?" I said, "Well, there's ketchup in my fucking glass of orange juice." I didn't say fuck, but I said, "There's ketchup in my orange juice. Why don't you guys go check it?" I mean, seeing as that's the big issue here is that he put ketchup in my orange juice. You guys see the color red at the bottom and wonder what it is. Why don't you guys go and look at it instead of taking a risk like this? And then the staff member says, "Oh, the table was clean." Well, sorry, I'm going to have to give you a double dose. We're holding you down. Okay, okay. No, please don't hurt me. Please stop hurting me. No, we're going to have to hold you down. Okay, get the needles ready. Yep, yep, yep. We're going to have to inject him with it. He's not going to take it orally. Nope, nope, nope. Let's force it on him. Oh, I don't care if you said you already took it. But it could hurt me taking double doses of amphetamines. Or I tell them, it could hurt. It could hurt, is what I'm saying at the age of 5. I'm not saying amphetamines. I'm only saying, it could hurt. Stop hurting me. Stop holding me down. Stop forcing this onto me again. And they force a double dose of amphetamines into me. Yes, twice in the same hour on the word of a 5-year-old who just wants to make somebody upset and get somebody else hurt. This happened in Lowell Treatment Center again on the word of my roommate. That this was at the age of like 12 or 13, and my parents are the ones giving these people permission after the age of 5. And in the orphanage, it was only amphetamines, one pill. By the time I was 13, my mother was having me double dosed with Thorazine, Lamictal, Seroquel, Trazodone, Ritalin, Xanax, uh, Risperidone, making my nipples leak weird pussy looking stuff in front of my nephew and my sister in law. I mean, weird stuff like that constantly. And my mother is giving permission for me to be held down and given 2 doses of these medications in the same hour because my roommate wants to spin a story because he's bored and been sitting in a room with stone walls for weeks on end and going to stupid groups where they try to tell you how to take pills. And so this kid's bored out of his mind. So he decides to play a game where he talks about cocaine. I tell him, "Why the hell are you talking about cocaine? What, do you want some? What's wrong with you?" And then that kid gets mad because I'm telling him to stop talking about all this shit, and he goes out to play a different game called "What's Drug My Roommate and Get Him Hurt." And then the staff members and the people that are in charge of me allow this. Yes, these treatment centers aren't helping children, they're hurting them. And I was a witness. I'm not the only one. You can talk to Angly Beth. You can talk to me. You can talk to many other children that went through these places, and each one of them will tell you their own little story about either getting smacked, raped by their roommate and nobody did anything, getting stabbed with somebody's needle in a shelter, nobody doing anything, officers of the law lighting you on fire, doctors giving you medications you don't need, doctors just going along with stories without spending time with the patient to get to know what they need. And that's the other problem. These psychiatrists are spending no time with their patients. Meanwhile, some underpaid intern is the one watching 30 kids, and they only have 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and then they're making big jumps and leaps to try to push medications onto these children and make them quiet. And wouldn't you know, most of the medications they give these children are making them drooling messes in the corner, and their parents love it. My mother loved when I was hurting, drooling on myself, tired. I mean, I was on Seroquel, Trazodone, Thorazine. I was on Lamictal, risperidone, Ritalin, and Xanax all at the same time. And then my mother got me put on lithium on 3 times a day on top of all that. And then when the program said, hey, Zach is a zombie all the time now, and the program's allowing it. They have no complaints. The program staff aren't complaining about me drooling on myself, not able to talk, being a zombie. The school doesn't care that I'm a zombie because they all know my mother is drugging me. They all know I look like this every single day. I look like a drooling zombie every single morning until about noon. Then, as the night meds wear off from the night before and the Ritalin and the other drugs wear off, I start coming back to normalcy. But by the time they issue more drugs, I go back to being a zombie again. But now with the extra drugs, I'm just zombified all the time. And my mother's noticing that people might catch on, that I'm zombified all the time instead of just 80% of the time. And I'm being drugged and I'm feeling this all the time now, 24 hours a day, instead of only when my mother's drugging me. Before, she would give me my drugs, I would get all fucked up, drooling, a mess, then they would wear off, I get back to normal, then she gives me more drugs, I get fucked up, I get back to normal. That's how my childhood went from age 7, 5, all the way on to 22, 23, around there. But my mother gave me so much drugs at one time that I couldn't even be a person. They called it a zombie. They said I was a zombie. I didn't even look like I was alive. So I'm underweight. I look like a skeleton. Now the medical professionals are putting zombie effect in my file. My mother's loading me up with pills. I'm bumping in the furniture. My mother's calling it self-harming. I survived an overdose at age 7 that isn't being treated. My mother and father trafficked me all over the country, making it so I couldn't get an education. They put their own happiness and profits before their own child's safety. And now the doctors are talking about zombie effects at the age of 16. And the only person taking me off this very dangerous medication that's causing a very visible bad effect all the time is my mother, because she's afraid she's going to get caught for all the other shit she's doing. So she takes that one out of the equation. Meanwhile, I'm still fucked up and zombified all the time until about noon, 12 o'clock to about 6. From 12 to 6, I get to be me. The rest of my life, I'm drug drooling, up, down. My mother's got all these drugs into me. My father's approving of ruler beatings. My mother is calling bumping in the furniture self-harming. She's taking my Vicodin. She's taking pills she's not prescribed. My mother's drinking heavily. She's calling me less than a dog, and she gets to treat me however she wants. She's throwing me off my seat and throwing me to the floor. I'm laying down, and then she says lay down some more, so I lay down even flatter. Then she says lay down flatter, so then I lay my body down as much physically possible as possible, and then she gets up to stomp at me, and the whole family says, stop what you're doing, no, no, no. So my mother's acting crazy in front of everybody. Her own grandson is afraid to visit, crying that she's hurting her own son, to stop hurting. This is not okay, this is not okay. She's hitting you with rulers for no reason, metal and plastic corner rulers on the side of the face. You got marks on your face. This needs to stop. There's drugs. You're playing tennis barefoot. Your skin is removed from the bottom of your skin, but you don't feel it. You're jumping in the pools and you don't feel a giant flap be ripped open on the back of your foot. Your mother's smacking the shit out of you and you barely feel it. Your mother dies and your father loses a USB and he smacks you some more. You're in a program and you're going to be in trouble because they think that your universal remote is a stolen product. So you go home asking for this paperwork, but they don't care if your parents call because you said to the program you would have your parents call. They said that's not good enough. You need to bring in the booklet. So even if I have my parents call, they said that they don't care about that. I already tried that. So at that point, I start looking through the house, but I was gone for 5 days thanks to my mother's and father's choices, and my mother threw it away. Well, now I'm in trouble and I'm going to be punished because of my mother's and father's choices once again. I asked my mother if she threw it away. She says no. She says, go to bed. I say, if I do, I'm in trouble. She goes, no, you're not. I say, yes, I am. She goes, no, you're not. Go to bed. It's only 8 o'clock and she has me on massive amounts of drugs, Thorazine, Seroquel, Lamictal, Trazodone, and all those are making my heart race. I feel a fear feeling. I'm feeling dizzy. I'm feeling like I'm going to vomit. And if I go to bed, I still vomit. I feel sick in my bed. Meanwhile, I'm going to be in trouble the next day. I tell my mother I don't like these meds. She doesn't care. She says, don't blame the meds. I'm now looking all over the house. My mother gets in my face, starts wagging it, and hits my nose with her finger, starts screaming at me, and no matter what. And now I'm supposed to be in trouble at the program because of my mother's and father's choices and actions. I'm supposed to feel sick in my bed because of my mother's and father's choices and actions. I'm supposed to go without my education because of my mother's and father's actions. I'm supposed to shake and have my nervous system hurting because of my mother's and father's actions up in bed. And my mother wants me to suffer some more when all I need is a piece of paper that was in the paper bin that was supposed to be magazines for keeping. That's where we keep that type of stuff. That's where I kept that, but now it's not there. I'm 16 years old. I know where it is. It's only been 5 days, but my mother moved everything and threw it away because it wasn't hers. My mother had a very bad habit of throwing away only my belongings. If it belonged to Zach, she could throw it away, ruin it, or do whatever she wanted with it. Now, my father would say that this is a fantasy, but I have proof. What did my mother say when she threw away my favorite toy in Westford? What was a gold-plated Pokemon card that was a collector's edition that is now worth hundreds of dollars. That was my favorite thing I owned when I came back from school, and it was off my bureau. What, it was a decoration in a case. What did my mother say? She said she threw it away, and I don't need to worry about what she throws away of mine. When my father and mother put me in a program and I had to follow their rules and I had important paperwork being stored so people don't steal it, what happened to that paperwork? It was moved and thrown away by my mother. Now, accidents happen and I forgive them for this. But before you can get forgiveness, you have to admit a mistake was made. And no matter how many mistakes my father and mother make, no matter how many beatings I take, no matter how many pills they ask me to take, no matter how much harm comes to my body, no matter where I move, El Paso, Texas, New Mexico, Maine, Chelmsford, Haverhill, Lawrence, Chelmsford, Lowell, whatever happens, they will not take responsibility for any of those choices or actions. Me missing out on an education because we moved to Texas, it's my fault. Me missing out on an education and getting abused in New Mexico, it's my fault. Me moving to Maine and missing out on an education and not having an education and being slow, it's my fault. My mother beating me with a ruler across the face for no reason other than her own fantasies, it's my fault. My mother telling everybody that me bumping into stuff from a neurological condition and trying to hide a neurological condition that she caused, my mother doing that is my fault. It's self-harming. It's nothing she did. Me bumping into my bed frame, me bumping in the tables, me getting scratches and scars on my body for 25 years after an overdose and I could feel this right after her overdose that she gave me when experimenting with pills with this little 7-year-old orphan that was me. Yes, she adopted an orphan right after giving him an OD at the same time. Not only this, she played doctor with pills my entire life, messing around with pills, sometimes sneaking her own medications into my pills. Like, for instance, when I went to my adoption and they told me they were bringing me to something to do with my adoption, and we had an adoption party. My mother slipped me some pills. I got so lethargic and tired, I passed out in the car ride. I passed out on the wooden bench, and I wanted to pass out on the floor for my own adoption party that was like a birthday party. People bring me a big giant $100 gift. Zach, welcome to the family. Here's a birthday gift. And I'm like, thank you. Is there a place I can sleep around here? And everybody doesn't know why, because my mother's hiding the fact she drugged her child. On top of this, did it happen the next day? Did I get tired from my medication the next day like that? No. Did I see the same color pill get mixed in? No. How about the following day? Did I get lethargic at that same time from the medication? No. My mother was doing this on purpose. Like on Halloween, every Halloween, my father said I could go out trick-or-treating. But my mother did not want me going out trick-or-treating, and everybody said I could. So I would get a costume and get ready to go out. But every year, from 7 to 13, or 7 to 12, around there, from the age of adoption all the way until the time we went into Chelmsford, every Halloween where I was supposed to go out trick-or-treating, my mother gave me my medication, and then I would start vomiting, getting sick, getting pale, getting weak. My mother would be the first one on top of this saying, oh, look, Zach's sick. Oh, yes, he's sick. He can't go out trick-or-treating. And she would get her way. But then it would clear up the next day, and it wouldn't happen with my medications again. Every Halloween, before I could get any candy, before I could go out and do any Halloween activities, my mother would give me medication, and then I would get a mystery illness, and then I would not be allowed out trick-or-treating. Every single Halloween till we moved to Chelmsford. Then all of a sudden, this mystery illness never appeared again, and my mother stopped administering me meds right before I went out trick-or-treating. Isn't it funny that my mother administers me meds and I get sick? My mother gives me meds, I have an overdose. I eat a mushroom, my mother gives me extra Epicac. It's time to go trick-or-treating, my mother gives me meds, I start vomiting. It's time to go trick-or-treating the next year, my mother gives me meds and I start turning pale and vomiting. The next year I start going trick-or-treating and my mother gives me a med, I turn pale and weak. That is not a coincidence, so that's abuse. And my mother admitted to this abuse. She admitted to giving her child extra Epicac and extra medication as a punishment, and she admitted that she thought it was okay to do so. My mother thought it was okay to give a child extra medication as a punishment as long as it was the orphan kid Zach. She would never do these things with her grandson, but she thought it was okay to do to an orphan. We can drug him, we can hit him with a ruler, we can move him around, we can interfere with his education, we can do all this because nobody cares how much you hurt this orphan. No matter how much you poison him, no matter how many organs you shut down, no matter if you cause him brain damage or organ failure, nobody's going to care or look into it as long as you keep him moving to El Paso. We'll go from Western Massachusetts to El Paso, Texas. Then 2 years later, we'll move him to New Mexico. Then 2 years later, we'll move him to Maine. Then 6 months later, we'll move him to Chelmsford. Then 2 years later, we'll move him to Haverhill. And then 4 years later, we'll move him to Lawrence. And then 1 year later, we'll move him to Lowell. And as long as we keep him moving, no doctors will ever get to spend enough time establishing what's really wrong with him, and we can keep on making up mental illness fantasies. Like, I won a swimming medal in the orphanage. I tried to show this medal to my mother. You know what my mother did when I tried to show her my swimming medal? Still to this day, on my medical record, it says I have illnesses because I showed my mother a swimming medal. That's what happened. I showed my mother my swimming medal, and she made up a bunch of mental illnesses, went to the doctor, made up a bunch of fantasies, told them that I'm writing my name on the back of the medal, even though a staff member wrote that in an orphanage. So I know she's full of shit. And it's very clear it's not my handwriting. Plus, it has my old last name on it, ZG, which only the orphanage would be writing on there. But instead, my mother made a fantasy, said, I have kleptomania, I'm a liar, I have attachment disorder, and I'm writing my old last name on everything to get back at her, so I have attachment disorder in a heavy level. Meanwhile, I love my mother, I love my family, I'm trying to show my accomplishments to my new mother, and she's mentally harming me by bringing me and making up all these stories. I'm crying and telling her to stop, please stop acting crazy and hurting me. Please stop. I'm crying every night as my mother makes up these stories. And I get used to my mother acting psycho like this. I have to suffer and deal with their stories. At the age of when I moved to Chelmsford, I was going to school in Worcester. I had to go to school and explain my mother's insanity to a teacher. I went to school, and my teacher called me over and said, why is your mother crazy? I said, what do you mean? What do you mean my mother's crazy? Well, we have a note right here that's very crazy from your mother. We sent a note home yesterday saying you did a great job, and you did. You did an awesome job yesterday. You did a great job helping us with the other students. You did so awesome, and we wanted to make sure your mother knew you did a good job. So we wrote the letter because your crazy mother is the only mother in the history of this school that has to have a letter every single day home. No other kid in this whole entire school has us writing letters home. But somehow your mother thinks that this is going to help, even though no kid in this entire school has ever been helped by writing letters daily home to a mother after their kid is in middle school. But your mother complained, screamed, acted like a lunatic, so we're doing it. But we sent a good letter home yesterday saying you did a good job, and now we have this letter in front of us that makes your mother speaking like a lunatic. That doesn't make any sense. We never said those things. We don't understand where she's getting this stuff from. I said, oh, I know where you guys are making a mistake. My mother likes to take good things and come up with fantasies making them bad. Like, for instance, I won a swimming medal and wanted to show it to my mother, and she called me a liar, a thief, and I had told the doctors I had attachment disorder, and told me and everybody else it must be an African American kid because he lives with her too, and he's athletic and black, and I'm white and skinny and not athletic, so it must be his. Even though I won it in the orphanage, just treading water, and a staff member wrote my name on it and told me to put it in the Lego box at the orphanage. But yet my mother wants to make up a fantasy. This is good. Your kid wants to show him his accomplishments. He won a medal in the orphanage, and he wants to show it to his mother. That's a good thing. But see, good things can't happen with my mother. She needs to turn everything into a bad. So her kid winning a swimming medal in a swim class in the orphanage? No, my mother can't take that. No, she has to spin 101 fantasies, turning it into a loony bin, horrible thing, make her son cry and cry and cry, and then try to get drugs put into her son that are unnecessary. So, 10 years later, or 9 years later, when I'm in the Worcester school, and the school is asking me, why is your mother acting such like a lunatic on this letter? It makes no sense. We know you've been doing good for weeks now. Why is your mother acting so loony? We didn't say these things in the letter that she says we said. We have the old letter right here. Nowhere does it say we said any of these things. So why is your mother sending a letter home like this? I said, I know. When I came home with the good letter, my mother punished me. She punished you for doing good in school? Yep. She did. I got home. I gave the good letter that you wrote saying I did a good job, an extra bonus. You did extra good this day. You helped out with the other classmates. I gave her that letter, and you know what my mother did? What? She moved the words around in the letter. She tried to make up a fantasy and tried to make up a narrative where she moves the letter around, where if you just read it plain as written, it clearly says I did a good job, but my mother's moving words around, changing the narrative, adding her own little brain nuggets in, and she's trying to make it a bad thing. I told her that if she called the school, they would say I did a great job, that this is a good thing, but my mother didn't want to call the school. Why? Because she knows what she's doing. So she punished me. I got punished for doing an extra good job in school. Then she wrote this letter to you guys and told me to bring it in, so I did. And now you guys are calling me over asking why my mother is a complete fucking lunatic. And I'm telling you, well, we know you did a good job yesterday. We know you've done good all week. We know that letter right here in front of us says you did a good job. I don't care how much letters and words your mother moves around. The letter is the letter. If you read it plain as it is, it says you did a good job. You did nothing. And I'm willing to call your mother and tell you that. Please do, because she's a complete loon. I don't want to be punished for doing a good job. Don't worry, we're going to fix this. We're going to call your mother after school and fix this shit. We don't like this letter here. I said, good. I sat back in class, and then I heard that my mother was screaming on the phone and getting in arguments with the Worcester school. My father doesn't know what the argument is about, but I do. My mother's acting like a fucking lunatic again, turning good things into bad, and the school does not like her turning good things into bad. So they're telling her to stop this, and my mother is just going off the rails with fantasies with them. And when I came back in the school the third day, The third day they said, "You poor kid. You poor kid. We're so sorry you have a mother like that." Meanwhile, the next week, my brother tells me the same thing. My brother Tim says, "You poor kid. I'm so sorry you have a mother like that." And then my nephew says, "You poor kid. Even though you're older than me, your mother scares the shit out of me. I don't want to visit no more." And then on top of that, when she passes away, her own son won't visit and says, "Oh man, I'm not visiting her at her funeral." Her own stepson doesn't want to visit. Me, her son, is crying because she took my health to the grave while dying, and I really loved her. She was the only mother I knew. I didn't love her hurting me, and that's why I used to get mad when she used to act crazy and hurt me. But when she was acting normal, I loved it when my mother acted normal. It was only 50% of the time. But you know what I had to hear? I had to hear my brother and my nephew, her grandson, come up to me at the funeral and say, "How could you be sad after all the shit? You poor boy, after all the shit she did to you, how could you be sad at her funeral?" Then her grandson, my nephew, comes up and playing with his friend and says, "How can you be sad after all the shit she did to you?" At my mother's funeral, I got people coming up to me asking me, how could I be sad at my mother's funeral? Yes, people came up to me, more than one person, and asked me that question. How can I be sad at my mother's funeral after all she did to me? I had to hear that at my mother's funeral, and they were right. They were right to ask me that question. They saw my mother hurting me for over 15 years, poisoning me, making up stories about me, and they want to know how the fuck I can be sad that my pain is finally gone. Because it's not. She brought her lies to the grave, and she brought my health to the grave. It's not over for me. You all get to go into the sunset, living your lives normal now that she's gone. I get to live in pain and die at a young age. That's what I get to do if my father doesn't fucking handle all this shit. And that's probably what my father's going to do. He's going to run off into a sunset. He's going to go on cruises, vacation. Meanwhile, I die from what him and his wife did to me. Yes, that's exactly probably what's going to happen. Pretty soon you're going to hear my last video. I'm getting thrown out of my housing thanks to this illness. I can't go back to work thanks to this illness. I can't use a shelter thanks to my illness not being documented. I can't drive a car or live in a car thanks to this illness. And you're going to hear that I'm dying in the woods, and then that'll be the last phone call because my phone won't be able to be charged in the woods, that's for sure. And I've lived like this before thanks to my father and mother. I've lived like this my whole entire life. When I was 9 years old, I was walking around the woods of a mountain in New Mexico having seizures on the ground by myself, being left outside in the elements. And when at the age of 9, I was forced to eat poisonous food that was rotten, chunky milk and rotten green eggs, or get choked until I can't breathe on a small love seat by a big giant black man around my throat. And then I get released as soon as I pass out, and then if I come back, they'll choke me some more. So I've been fighting for my life since day one of joining this family. I had to fight for my life during an overdose at age 7. I was supposed to be just watching Batman Mr. Freeze. That was what was supposed to happen. We were supposed to watch a movie as a family. But instead, my mother brought me into a hallway, gave me a bunch of pills, and then I had an overdose where I lost my vision. My mother called the emergency people. They told her to bring me to the ambulance. She refused and said they don't know what they're talking about, and left me on a pile of newspapers, going unconscious, my breathing slowing down after screaming for help, but my tongue and my mouth isn't working. I'm going, help me, help, something's wrong, help, I can't walk. And I'm trying to stand up, I'm falling down. I can't see, I'm saying I can't see out of my eyeballs. And then I pass out. My breathing slows down on a pile of newspapers, and I pass out. When I wake up, there's permanent damage to my nervous system, and I want to know why my whole body feels differently. But nobody will tell me why my body definitely changed that day. But the teachers are asking me why my body seems different. The next day at school or the next week at school after this overdose, the teacher brings me into the hallway and asks me why my arm is moving weird while writing, why my mouth melt and my words sound differently, and why it seems like my whole body has changed overnight and there's a slight difference in me. I don't know why, and I tell her that. She says she's going to call home and talk to my parents, which I get put in the physical therapy, speech therapy. The doctors want to look into it, and my mother does not. My mother hears about the overdose. I speak up to the doctor. At that point, my mother decides to take me out of all this help and put me in ballet. After the ballet, she moves me to El Paso, Texas. That's a cover-up for a crime. It's called trafficking. It's called neglect, overdose, mismanaging of medication, covering up a crime, and then trafficking of a child of the state after adoption. That's the proper legal terms for what my mother did. Now, it might not sound pretty saying it like that. It might be better for me to describe what happened, like I just did, but it's not fun to be living my life and have assholes try to tell me it's a fantasy while other people ask me about it. Then why did the teacher ask me about it? Why did I fall? Why did I seize? Why did I bump in the furniture? Why did you, my father and mother, call me into the living room asking me why I have scrapes on my shins when bumping in the furniture? You knew I was bumping in the stuff. You knew my shins were all cut up. You knew my wrists were macking in the stuff. You knew I was bumping. I told you what was going on. Why was nothing done? Because my mother spun another fantasy. My mother said that if you were bumping in the furniture, your wrists are bumping into doorknobs, you can't control your nervous system, your legs aren't working properly, you're bumping in the tables, chairs, bed frames, you can't move your body properly, your shoulders are bumping in the walls and door frames. My mother said that that's called self-harming and cutting yourself. My mother spun a fantasy that me accidentally bumping in the furniture because of a neurological disorder was called self-harming. Now, I knew that was complete fucking shit. I knew that was bullshit what my mother was trying to spew that day. My father knew it was bullshit. But my father said, I don't think so. I said, I know that's not true. I'm telling you what's going on. But my mother said, I don't care what you guys say. It's self-harming. And then I never got the help I needed. Now, who came clean that day? I told my mother and father that I had a problem with my nervous system and I was bumping in the furniture. Now, I didn't know the word nervous system and I didn't know how the nervous system worked. But I explained that not on purpose all the time since age 7 that I've been bumping in the stuff normally. This is normal for me. My shins are getting cut up, scratched, bumped into it. I got scabs. It hurts. My wrists are bumping in the doorknobs. My shoulders bumping in the doorways. My leg is bouncing around. I'm not able to really move my body right. I told my parents about this several times, but my mother always had a new fantasy to spin. If my mother was taking her son's drugs, you know what my mother would call that? Only one time. And then you know what my father would call it? That's fine. And then you know what happens if we reverse this? If another adult takes his meds, then it's not fine, even if it's one time. See, my father believes in fantasies, as long as they come out of his wife's mouth. My mother can call, okay, if my father's son came up to them and said that they have a swimming medal they won at school to show to him, his wife could make up a fantasy about it being African American kids, that it means that that the kid's trying to harm her, that the mother is being abused by taking this medal because it has a different letter at the end of the name, so that the kid's really out to get her. On top of this, the mother will say that the child is a liar and a thief. This is a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old we're talking about that's never lied or stolen in his life. So now we have the mother making up a story about this medal being stolen, about it being some African American kids. We have a story about a bunch of lies that she never heard, saw, or know about, because there is no lies. On top of this, we have my mother saying that the G was written on there by the son, when really some blonde 23-year-old wrote the G on the medal at a swimming pool. So we have my mother fantasizing about how the G got on there, and then we have my mother fantasizing about this metal being an attack on her. So she thinks everybody's out to get her. Well, that's a mental disorder all in itself, thinking everybody's out to get you while having no evidence or anything in front of you to prove that. All she has is her son saying, look, I won a medal. That's it. I showed them the medal I won in my orphanage. That's all. I won a medal for treading water in my orphanage. The staff member wrote ZG on the back and told me not to let it get stolen by the other kids. I put it in my Lego box, and that was it. I go through foster care. I meet this mother, this foster mother, and she adopts me. She ODs me and doing horrible stuff to me, and I want to show her this accomplishment. So I go into my Lego box, I'm playing with my Legos, and I see the medal. I go, oh, my mother will love seeing this. So I walk out of the room, down the hallway, and I say, Mom, look at this medal I won. And then my mother creates more and more fantasies because that's what she does. That's my mother's mental illness. She did it with notes. She did it with medals. She did it with injuries. She did it with mental illnesses that don't exist. And whenever she got into trouble, she just moved and restarted her life or just moved her son around so nobody could get a read on what was going on. And now I'm 31, suffering horribly in pain in my nervous system, needing medical care, needing Social Security, needing a home to stay in when I'm willing to work a job while on Social Security to do. Meanwhile, I worked while getting injured from my disabilities, what I wasn't supposed to be doing. And no matter what I do, I'm fucked because my father and mother decided to make sure to hide their mistakes by setting me up for death. Yes, they wanted to make sure I would die frozen, and I almost did. I'm almost, oh my God, I'm lucky to be alive. The only reason why you're hearing my voice now is the grace of God. I froze to death and they shocked me back to life. Everybody was surprised I lived. At the age of 7, I got an overdose that was so severe, my breathing slowed down, and there was a very good chance I would die. And on top of this, my whole body was fried and my nervous system was affected by life. So everybody's surprised that you could live through something like that. My mother gave me extra medications for 15 years. I'm lucky I lived through that. I was left out in the woods after a seizure in New Mexico, and I was forced to eat food-poisoned food until I got poisoned and food poisoning for over 7 days. In a program where the black guy, a big giant 300-pound black guy, chokes you out and tries to get kicks out of hurting white children. Then on top of this, you got everything else I've mentioned. We got the falls. We got the lack of medical care. We got 4 years of missing education. On top of this, I've had a seizure recently in the last 3 years that was caused by this neurological disorder that's not being treated. If I was allowed to get treatment, if my father and mother didn't try to get me killed and try to avoid any responsibility, if my mother wasn't hiding her crimes, then I wouldn't have had that seizure because I would be getting some medical help. I would be on epilepsy medication. I wouldn't be trying to walk through a dizzy storm while having seizures on the side of the road easy. That would be very easy for me. I wouldn't be doing those things. I would be on Social Security and I would be forming transportation to go to work. But that's not an option thanks to my mother's and father's choices today. I can't use a shelter. If I walk into a shelter, I'll be thrown out thanks to my mother's and father's choices. How does that happen? I go into the shelter, right? Now we know I can't walk in the morning or use my nervous system right off the rip. Takes a couple hours of rubbing and doing some leg pumps and things before I can stand up and fully walk around. Also, we know that cold, like walking outside and with no shirt on in the middle of winter, causes an instant seizure, fall to the ground, and go unconscious a lot of the time. So I know for facts from going in shelters before that they do not provide hot water. And I also know you must take a shower. If you don't take a shower, you're thrown out. And if you don't move and get out of there in the morning right away, you're thrown out permanently as well. Now, if you have a disability, you bring in paperwork from your doctors that describe you've been going through this your whole life for 25 years, and then they can't throw you out for having a seizure or not being able to move right away because you have doctor documentation. But seeing as my mother and father tried to hide my illness and make up mental illnesses, and I have no documentation, and I've been working on getting documentation about my disabilities for 11 years now. But every time I go to a doctor and try to get my disabilities diagnosed, my mother's and father's bullshit get in the way. My mother and father say it's all fantasies, don't pay attention, don't test him. The insurance companies won't pay for stuff. They move appointments out years. Just once when you read my file and everything my mother and father lied about in their cover stories, it makes it very hard to get a diagnosis, especially this late in life. You're supposed to get a diagnosis during childhood when you go through stuff like this. When my mother and father saw me lose my vision and lose the ability to talk, walk, when I passed out on a pile of newspapers, they were supposed to get me help then. When I was talking about this in the doctor's office in Westford and brought this up in front of my mother and father, I was supposed to get help then. When I brought this up at the doctor's office in Texas and the doctors were worried about it then, I was supposed to get help then. But I was moved to New Mexico. Then I was moved to Maine. No doctors. I wasn't allowed to see doctors in New Mexico. I wasn't allowed to see doctors in Maine. When we got back to Chelmsford and I was starting to talk about it, I was told to shut up and stop talking about it. So no matter how many times it had to be looked at when it was happening and when it first happened to me at age 7 with the overdose. But the more my mother and father hid this from doctors and made up fantasies like, oh, there's 101 illnesses wrong that are all mental that can't be proven. Yeah, we're going to say he has bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, ADHD, anxiety, PTSD, he's a fire setter, he likes to hurt animals, whatever else they could come up with. And how many animals have I hurt in my life? I've stepped on one ant, I've killed 5 spiders, and I burned some slug slime. Not the slug itself, just the slime. To see if I could make a fireproof fire extinguisher to help society. And where does the fire setter come from? Where does the hurting animals come from? Oh, that's right, my mother spun a fantasy. I did the scientific method and I lit a match and brought it to some slug slime to see if a slug slime would be good as a fire extinguisher, seeing as the TV documentary says that the Romans used to believe that slugs were born out of fire because slugs, baby slugs, come out of burning hot coals that out of fires, campfires. So if they can survive burning hot coals, the Romans thought they were born out of fire, but they weren't. Well, if the slime can protect them from those type of degrees, burning hot coals, then maybe there's some fireproof thing to the slime. So I hold the match to the slime, and it doesn't work any better than water. And I tell my father I did this. Hey, I did an experiment with a match. I'm sorry I played with fire, but nothing came of it. I did it in a safe way. My father tells my mother says he's hurting animals. He's a fire setter. He's going to burn down houses. We got to get him into the hospital and give him on drugs. Then they give me Thorazine, Seroquel, Lamictal, Risperidone, Xanax. My mother wants to get me on schizophrenic medications. Why? Nobody knows. The doctors don't know why. I don't know why. My father doesn't know why. My brother doesn't know why. The nurses don't know why. Nobody knows why. My mother wants me on as many drugs as possible. She wants me on drugs that I don't even need, like Zyprexa. When people ask her, hey, Patricia, why do you want Zach on schizophrenic medications? My mother has no answer. I'm not schizophrenic. I don't hear voices. I've never been schizophrenic. Why does my mother want me on as many drugs as possible? Why would a mother want such a thing as many drugs as possible with side effects to be in her son? Oh, because she's trying to make mental illnesses. She's trying to make up illnesses. She's trying to get Social Security. So she's trying to make her son disabled so that way they have a way out when he turns 18. They can just drop him off on Social Security, not their problem. So I'll just drug the shit out of him, make him disabled, make him seem disabled, tell stories about him, and in the long run he'll get money for it. Meanwhile, it's damaging my body seriously. And I hope everybody's learning something from this, because every goddamn word is the God honest truth. So God help me. If I'm lying about my mother, about any of this, may God have me burn in hell for eternity. Because all I'm trying to do here is tell the truth and get people to understand what my mother was doing by explaining the real facts, what really happened in front of witnesses, doctors, teachers. I mean, it's no fantasy. Unless this teacher was fantasizing, the doctors are fantasizing. The doctors in Westwood were fantasizing. The doctors everywhere. Unless everybody who came up to me during my childhood is having a shared fantasy. This is not a fucking fantasy. 25 years of falling down in pain, shaking, and having hundreds of doctors talk to you about, ask you questions. Hey, why are you bouncing around? Why are you twitching? Why are your legs uncontrollably twitching? Why did you fall just now? Why is your speech seem weird? Why do you need to go to physical therapy? Why do you need speech therapy? Why did your mother put you in ballet? Why are you falling down? Why are you wearing a jacket? Why are you hurting? Why do you seem in pain? Why are you shaking? Why do you feel like you're falling down? Why did you have a seizure? Why you just had a seizure? Why did you go unconscious? Why? I've been asked this question my whole life. Why did my mother destroy my health is the real question. What everybody sees, what everybody keeps on mentioning, is a neurological disorder, PTSD, and anxiety that has not been allowed to be treated for 25 years. That's what you're witnessing. It's got worse over time. People were asking me about it at age 7, 9, 12, 15, but the longer you wait, the worse your illness gets, the more people ask, and the more apparent it becomes, and the more ridiculous your life becomes. Like, for instance, trying to do simple things like cook at a stove or walk to the store during fall become bigger and bigger the longer you go without medical care, the more lies and stuff your mother makes up, and the more your father tries to run away and try to avoid responsibility so you can never get the help you need. As long as my father continues going along with my mother's lies and he continues to keep secrets from the doctors, I will continue to be in pain and suffer. As long as my father is still covering my mother's ass and going along with fantasies, I'm still going to be in pain. I'm going to keep trying to just get the basic medical care for what the people say. Like, if I have a seizure, I want to know why I'm having seizures. Now, the emergency rooms and the doctors have clearly told me that those falls on the ground where I wake up bloody are called seizures. Okay. Now, when did they start? When did all these symptoms start? Age 7. But we're not looking into the seizures, we're looking into the cause of the seizures, the neurological condition that is 24 hours a day. The seizures happen now once a year, and during childhood once every 4 years or so. But the neurological condition is visible 24/7. Just sit in a freezer with me, and in a matter of time, you'll notice that I can't talk, my legs and arms are wiggling, and I'll scream. I will slit your throat to get out of that freezer. It becomes so painful. You'll hear me throw you out of the way. You'll hear me scream to let me out. Oh my God. And then if I get stuck in there for too long and I do have seizures, whoever locked me in that freezer is going to die when I come out. Because yes, if I walk into a freezer and spend more than 5 minutes in there, I start having seizures, shakes, and my neurological pain. I fall to the ground. And if you purposely force me into a freezer and lock me in there, and then I have a seizure and I end up in the emergency room, I can't walk or talk anymore, you better believe that I'm going to blame the guy who did it to me. Just like the people who did this to me in the first place need to take responsibility for their actions, and then I can forgive them. But if people are doing stuff like hurting other people, killing other people, torturing other people, and then putting the blame on other people, I don't put up with that fucking shit. If you take responsibility and know you did something wrong, and you're trying to make it stop or trying to make it better, and you're not going to do that shit anymore, like if you're allowing your son to die and end up in emergency rooms from your own choices and actions, and all you have to do is tell the truth to make it stop, but you're choosing to continue to lie and cover up your wife's mistakes, and then your son continues to have seizures, has scars all over his body, he continues to not drive and get harmed by this choice you're making to hide what your wife did to him, well, you're committing the same thing over and over. Every single day you wake up and make that same decision to keep your mouth shut and hide your mistakes is another day you're causing that person harm. Every day you wake up you're making a new decision to hide your mistakes. Any day you want, you can wake up, go down to the Department of Health and Human Services with your son and spend time trying to clear this up. Anybody could do that. But if you're choosing to hide your mistakes, that is a choice you make daily. Every time you wake up, you're making a choice to lie, hide your mistakes, and not discuss the problems that are killing your son or killing other people. Even if it's a different person you never met before. If somebody else is dying because you poisoned their food and you're keeping it a secret. Like if you went to Market Basket and you poisoned an apple with antifreeze that's going to cause a lot of harm, and then you're keeping the fact that you put antifreeze in a bunch of food, you're the person harming those people. It's not their fault they picked up the poison apple from the grocery store. It's your fault for keeping it a secret. If you want to have God forgive you, go down and tell somebody that you poisoned the apples at Market Basket. Then somebody will stop eating those poisoned apples and they can help the people that already ate those. Because if somebody's eating a regular apple and they're not knowing it's poisoned, they might not ever get medical care. All because you kept your mouth shut about what you did. So if a person goes into a grocery store and poisons an apple, leaves and goes home, and then knows he's going to go to hell and he wants to be forgiven, how do you get forgiven for poisoning an apple at Market Basket? You go and tell Market Basket what you did so they can help him. Because then Market Basket will contact the shoppers that bought the apples, and then if any of those customers end up in the hospital with mystery illnesses, they'll know why and maybe they can help him. But if you keep your mouth shut about the poisoned apple and somebody buys that poisoned apple at the grocery store, goes home and feeds that apple to their children, and then their children get sick, it is the person who poisoned the apple's fault, not the guy who bought the apple and gave it to his son. The guy who injected the apple with poison is the one making a decision every single day to keep his mouth shut. All you have to do is open your mouth, tell somebody what you did, and then that person can go get medical help, because then people know what's wrong. But if you keep secrets about stuff you did wrong, or stuff your wife did wrong, or stuff your friends did wrong, that could cause severe harm to another person or even kill other people, then you're doing a sin and you're killing somebody every day of your life by keeping that to yourself. Same thing with the poisoned apple and my father. My father allowed his wife to do horrific things to a child. He's keeping that a secret and let her cover up her mistakes by trafficking that child and making up stories about that child. Now, that child has suffered from childhood at age 7 to 31. He's 31 years old, suffering greatly. Everybody around him is constantly asking him about these seizures, shakes, all these cuts, scars, stitches, bleedings. People are worried about him, and he always has to explain. And well, this started at age 7 with an overdose. Then I started having these weird times where I would shake and then go unconscious on the ground and wake up. I was still shaking. I was still having lightning down my spine. This has been going on for 25 years. Why has nobody helped you then? Well, because whenever I go to the doctors talking about this, my mother calls it an allergy attack. Whenever I'm bumping in the furniture and my whole body is cut up, my mother calls it self-harming. Whenever I end up hurt on the ground from a seizure, I just think I fell down because nobody's giving me information. Everybody's keeping this a secret. At the age of 7, I wanted to know what happened with me, why I lost my vision, why I couldn't walk, why I couldn't use my nervous system, why my breathing slowed down, why I went unconscious, and why when I woke up I was different in my body for the rest of my life. Why when I suck on my skin does it feel different than before this overdose felt? Why does my whole body different for life? And I brought this up in front of my mother and father and a doctor. But my mother called it an allergy attack, dodged the question, and continued to dodge it. She also refused to go along with what the doctors and teachers wanted. They wanted me in physical therapy, speech therapy. They wanted me to go see a neurologist and doctors. My mother put me in ballet and moved me to Texas instead. Yes, they're worried about my health. They're worried something's wrong with my body. But instead of looking into that, they're going to move to Texas and put me in ballet. That is why I have this problem today, and why when I go into the doctor's office as a broke man with $0, it's very hard for me to get help. Very hard, because we need documentation and people coming forward speaking the truth about what they saw about my mother's horrible actions. Yes, the horrible stuff, the awful stuff that everybody's keeping a secret. That's the stuff that the doctors need to hear about. They need to hear about the pills. They need to hear about how I went unconscious from my adoption. They need to know what those pills were. They need to know what doctors I spoke with. They need to know why you made the decisions you made. They need to know if I was ill at age 7. Did I look good at age 7? Was I having problems at age 7? Was I moving my body okay at age 7? The doctors now need to know about then. You can't know what to do in the future without understanding the past. My father and mother was trying to hide their past, so now the doctors in the future now can't help me. Plus, if I had enough money, like if I was a millionaire, then maybe I could get the help I need. But the only way I'm going to become a millionaire is if I actually treat my disability and work hard. But if I don't treat my disability, I'm not going to be able to work. So there's no way for me to treat my disability with millions of dollars if I need to cure my disability to make money. So it goes in a circle no matter. The only solution to this problem is my father being honest with the people around him, and that he loves and cares about the people that cared about him. When my father got caught doing stuff wrong with Social Security, yes, he got me thrown out of my housing, stole my rent money, and used it for his own property. I was supposed to be giving $600 a month to the program because that's what it was if you were on Social Security. But my father lied to the program, lied to me, and lied to the Department of Health and Human Services and kept the money for himself, even though the law clearly stated he was supposed to tell his son about it and pass it over. And the program clearly stated on the paperwork that if I was on Social Security, that I had to pay rent. And it was very clear on the paperwork that they asked my father, is your son on Social Security? Which he lied on there too. So, after he stole this rent money every month for a year and got caught for it, the Department of Health and Human Services was going to bring him to court and make him pay me back the 12 grand, and then I was going to have to pay back the program, and I was going to be able to stay. But my father was already very mad, and I know my mother and father very well. They will take this out on me. If I receive 12 grand from them because they broke the law, they're going to blame me, not themselves. Remember, my father and mother can't take responsibility for their actions. They're in their almost 90 now. So I knew that if I went along with the law and regulations, because my father made a mistake, that he was going to have to fix this mistake. It had nothing to do with me. I didn't ask them to do this, but if I signed the paperwork, my father and mother were going to blame me, even if they didn't say so. Not only this, that I will never get my health fixed. I need my mother to come clean with the stuff she's doing, and I need my father to admit the things that he sees in front of him. We already got my brother admitting to it. We got my sister hearing about it, worried about it. We got outside forces in the family very worried about what my mother's doing to me. We just need my mother and father to come clean with the honest truth. So if I just go along with the law and what's supposed to happen, my father pays me back, I pay back the program, I get to stay in the program. But my father's already going to blame me. So I tell my father, as long as he keeps my Social Security, hires a lawyer, and makes sure that I get my income every month after this, seeing as he made a mistake, we got to make sure I keep my Social Security, then I won't sign the paperwork. He looks me in the eye, shakes my hands, and agree. So he gets to keep his 12 grand in money. He doesn't get in any trouble. He only gets one report filled out that he stole his son's money. I get thrown out of my housing. I move back home to take care of my sick mother, my father tells everybody, but really I'm moving home because he made a mistake and got me thrown out. And on top of this, then he goes back on his word, breaks his promise, and decides that he's not going to do anything to clean up his mess. Once again, now that he got his deal, he's going to not take responsibility for his actions and run off into the sunset, taking cruises and vacations, leaving other people to suffer for his mistakes. I no longer have my Social Security thanks to his choices and his actions. I no longer have an apartment or a room to stay in thanks to his choices and his actions. I no longer have any of those things, but I